Hello everybody, welcome back to my book channel. I'm so excited to be filming this video because I watch so many reading wrap-ups at the end of every month. It's one of my favorite videos to watch. I always get really excited at the end of the month. And this month I have so many fun books to talk about. I'm really excited. Now, as I do work a full-time job, my friends, this is going to be an April and May reading wrap up because I can't read like a million books in like a month. So yeah, I'm really excited to talk about all of the books that I read in April and May. So without further ado, let's just get into it. Okay, so I think I said in my first like booktube newbie tag that I read a lot of different genres. And that was definitely true in April and May. There was like a huge mix of genres that I read. So I'm scrolling back to find the first book that I read. Okay, so the first book that I read in April was The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. Now, The Picture of Dorian Gray often gets described as one of the best classics to start with if you're a beginner in like classic literature. And I've read a fair amount of classics now, and honestly, I would agree. The Picture of Dorian Gray is about a man named Dorian Gray who makes some poor life choices, morally gray character, maybe just not the best guy. But it starts out with Dorian and a painter whose name I cannot remember. And basically, this painter has created a beautiful portrait of Dorian Gray. And one of the most notable things about Dorian Gray's character is that he is a gorgeous man. And he basically wishes that the portrait could grow old and that Dorian Gray could stay young forever, kind of like they could switch places. And let's just say that this wish sets the tone for the rest of the story. Now, I gave The Picture of Dorian Gray 4 stars. I wouldn't say it was like the most riveting piece of literature I've ever read, but I gave it 4 stars because it was still like a really wonderful classic, and I definitely find myself like thinking about it regularly. And yeah, I don't know. I would highly recommend reading it, especially if you're kind of afraid to start in classics. Highly recommend The Picture of Dorian Gray. Okay, so that one I listened to through my library. You guys will notice that I read books in a lot of different places. I have like stacks of books. I check them out from the library. I'll listen to them on the Libby app. Okay, so the next book that I read in April is not this one, actually. It's a book in this series. I read The Dark Forest, which is the second book in the Three Body Problem trilogy. And this is a really like wild, crazy sci-fi series. And the reason I wanted to bring this book is because I had to check the other book back into my library, but also I can't really describe the second book without spoiling the first. So if you haven't read The Three Body Problem, it honestly goes through so many different timelines and so many different characters. It's like your classic sci-fi experience. The book starts out with basically this like attack on science. Scientists have gotten to this point where they're not making any more progress. So much so to the point where scientists, physicists, engineers, all these really intelligent people in society are either dying or committing suicide, and people are trying to figure out what's up. And so one of our characters, who I would argue is like the main guy, he becomes victim to this problem where he can't make any more scientific progress. He's starting to see things and experience things that aren't quite right. And throughout this story, characters start to uncover what's really going on. There's obviously something way bigger at play. And I don't want to spoil anything. So if you are interested in sci-fi, extraterrestrial vibes, I would highly recommend this series. I feel like the best way to describe it would be like the intersection between Dune and Ready Player One, but also no, like it's very much its own thing, but it has elements of both. So yeah, if you're interested, would highly recommend this. But again, I read the second book in this series in April, not this one. Oh, and I gave The Dark Forest 3 stars. It was really beautifully done. I loved it. But with that said, the reading experience kind of takes a lot of mental energy. Like, it was really difficult for me to like fully understand what was going on at times, which is the reason that I gave it 3 stars, but it was still really good. Ooh, I'm getting kind of hot. I think I'm going to take this off. Okay, the next book that I read, I honestly did not really like, so I don't want to talk about it that much. Checked this out from the library. It's called Before the Coffee Gets Cold. And this is a book I've heard about from so many like well-known creators that they enjoyed. So I was really looking forward to it, but unfortunately I was let down by it quite a bit. I gave it 2 stars. And basically this book, the reason it was so disappointing is because the concept is so cool. Before the Coffee Gets Cold is basically about this coffee shop in Japan. And basically you can go there and have a cup of coffee, but if you have like the right cup of coffee at the right table, it has the ability to take you back in time. But you only have the amount of time it takes for the coffee to get cold to be in the past, if that makes sense. So you can only go back in time for however long your coffee is warm. And this concept is so, so cool. And I just loved the idea of it, but I thought the execution was a little bit poor. There's all these rules that come with, the time travel and everything, and they were said over and over and over again. And it just made me feel like these characters weren't very smart, which I don't think was the goal. I think it was like supposed to be high stakes. That's why they're mentioning it so many times. But for me, I was like, gosh, these characters are really just not catching on. And yeah, I felt like it was really redundant, and like we could have been so deeply impacted by this idea, and I felt like it just wasn't done. So yeah, Before the Coffee Gets Cold, I gave it 2 stars. I didn't really like it. On to the next. Okay, the next book I do have a physical copy of. The next book is November 9th by Colleen Hoover. This was actually a birthday gift from my sister Lily. She's actually also making a booktube channel. I'm going to link her channel down below if you guys want to check it out. We're doing this together. So yeah, go hype her up. She's the best. This was my second Colleen Hoover book that I'd ever read. The other Colleen Hoover book that I've read is Confess, and I gave that 5 stars. I loved it. And so this was my next one. And this book it's obviously a romance, and it's about our 2 main characters, Ben and Fallon, and they meet every single year on November 9th. And each of these characters, in classic Colleen Hoover style, have experienced some very difficult pasts. They've been through a lot, and they go through a lot throughout this story. And so we basically get to see how these characters have grown every single year on November 9th. And Ben is a writer, and he's trying to write a story, about the 2 of them and their love story meeting every year on November 9th. I will say, the plot twists in here are crazy. I swear Colleen Hoover laces her pages with drugs. Like, you can't not just devour it all in like 2 sittings. I really, really enjoyed this book. I think I gave it a 4.5. I either gave it a 4 or 4.5, but this book was really, really good. If you like romance, I highly recommend checking out November 9th. It's also like a super breezy little read. So yeah. Okay, the next book that I read, we're still in April, really surprised me. I read another romance. I read Archer's Voice by Mia Sheridan, and this was kind of a funny story. So I went on a trip to the Bay Area to visit my mom and my sister to say hi and that I love them. And I brought this book with me, but I finished this like right after we landed, so I needed another book to read. And so my sister was like, oh, hey, like you can borrow Archer's Voice, see what you think. And a lot of people that I knew didn't love this book, but the Goodreads reviews were really high, so I didn't know what to expect. This book played me like a violin. I loved it so much. It had me wrapped around its little finger. Oh my God, I loved this book so much. I understand the hype completely. But basically it is another romance story about our main girl named Bree and a guy named Archer. And the story opens with Bree, who's kind of, processing a lot of really traumatic things that have happened to her. She's absolutely a victim of PTSD. And amidst trying to get away from these really difficult things that have gone on in her life, she ends up in this small town that she had visited growing up and meets Archer. Now, what's interesting about Archer is during their first interaction, Archer doesn't speak to her at all. Oh man, my camera's gonna run out of storage. Okay, hopefully I look kind of similar. My camera storage got filled up. But basically, she meets Archer, and Archer doesn't speak to her. It's a very interesting way for the story to start, but we ultimately learn that Archer doesn't speak. And so you get to watch this really beautiful relationship emerge through some of, the difficult things that these characters have been through and how their pasts do have some unique similarities. Again, the plot twists in here were wonderful, did not see them coming at all. One of them I did. But some of the other little twists and turns I did not see coming. And yeah, I really, really loved this book. Like, so far, this is one of my favorite books that I've read this year. And it was such a surprise because, again, I just randomly picked it off my sister's shelf and started reading it. And then I loved it. This was like a 4.75 or something like that. Like, I loved it so much. Okay, the next book, it's not going to come as a surprise to anybody. I think now this is starting in the month of May. Yeah, I did finish this in May. So we do have The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, written by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I have read Malibu Rising by Taylor Jenkins Reid and absolutely loved it. And I read that in like early 2022, I think, and loved it, 5 stars. So naturally, this has been at the top of my TBR for so long, and I finally got around to reading it, and this was a 5-star read. I loved it so much. It's basically about this old Hollywood celebrity named, I almost just said Taylor Jenkins Reid, named Evelyn Hugo. Now, at the start of our book, Evelyn Hugo is older. She's in retirement. She hasn't done an interview in a long time, but it comes out that she, wants to do an interview, and she requests a very specific reporter. And this reporter is newer, and so you're trying to figure out the connection that Evelyn Hugo has to this reporter. But throughout the entire story, we're basically getting to hear Evelyn Hugo's life story and who each of her 7 husbands were, and the Hollywood scandals that she was a part of, or the truth and the trials and tribulations. And oh my goodness, it was so good. There's this element of mystery throughout it, which is like her relationship to the reporter, but also just the things that she experienced as like a Hollywood star. Again, Taylor Jenkins Reid's writing is just beautiful and addicting, and I'm absolutely a fan. So yes, this was a 5-star from me. Please go read it. I loved it so much. It was fantastic. Okay. The next book that I read in May, I did actually make a reading vlog about it. So if that's not up by the time this video is up, apologies. It should be up soon. If not, if it is already up, go check it out. We all knew that this was coming. This is A Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah J. Maas. This was so good. I loved this book. This is an adult fantasy book. It's part of a very large series, actually. The books in here are huge, and like I said, I loved this. I don't even know where to start. So A Court of Thorns and Roses follows a human girl named Feyre, and she is doing everything that she can to provide for her family. They're very poor. It's like the dead of winter. And so she kills this wolf at the very beginning to feed her family. Long story short, the wolf is not a wolf, and she gets swept off into the Fey realm. And things kind of go crazy over there. And you get to see Feyre grow a lot as a character. She connects with the people in this realm, and it's really, really good. I will say I'm reading the second book now, and I feel like it just is this book, but even better. And yeah, I would highly recommend this. This is definitely like a fantasy romance story. Really good, really action-packed, a little bit slow to start, which might be an unpopular opinion. Again, more details about this in my reading vlog, but I did really, really enjoy this story. Okay, the last book that I read in May, I don't actually have a physical copy of it because I bought it on my Kindle, but I read Happy Place by Emily Henry, which was my most anticipated read of the year. So Emily Henry is probably, if she's not my favorite romance author, she's one of my favorite romance authors. I've read all her books, and Happy Place, I connected with this book in a way that I have not connected with a book in a very long time. I gave it like 6 stars. Like, one of the best books I've ever read in my entire life. I laughed so much. I cried literally so much. And I'm begging you to get your hands on this book if you haven't read it yet. So, put simply, Happy Place by Emily Henry is, again, it's a romance story, but it's so much more than that. Basically, this story follows a group of 6 close friends who were all like in the same friend group in college. And every year they go to this house on like the coast of Maine to spend time together. I'm like having a hard time describing this book because I loved it so much and I want to do it justice. The main character in this book, her name is Harriet, and when she was in college, she basically started dating Win. And so the book takes place like 10 years later or something like that, and they're no longer together, but they don't want to ruin the like big trip that they have planned with their friends, so they decide to fake date just to basically like get through the week and not like, I don't know, mess up the trip. And we do have multiple timelines throughout this story. So it goes back to when Harriet and Win were in college, and then also the present timeline of them all being at this house. And the friendships in here, the romance in here, everything in it felt so real, and for some reason hit so close to home for me. I just absolutely loved the characters, the storytelling, the romance. A lot of romances, I feel like you have to look past certain things that aren't realistic, and this one just was not like that at all. I felt like I could believe just about everything in it. I just loved it so much, and I don't want to say too much because I went into it pretty blind, and I think that's part of why I had such a good experience. So yeah, it was like fake dating, like kind of small town vibes. I don't know if it's technically small town, but that's like what it was giving. Total summer vibes. I loved it so much. That's probably my favorite book of the year so far, tied with Love in Other Words by Christina Lauren. Okay, so the last thing that I wanted to touch on in this video is my current reads. And there are 3 of them. I don't do this on purpose, but it does often happen. So I mentioned that I read A Court of Thorns and Roses. Well, that ended so wonderfully that I had to continue on to this brick, which is A Court of Mist and Fury. So right now I'm about 126 pages in, and I'm also making a reading vlog about this, and I am loving it. Right now it's like sitting in between a 5 and a 6, which coming from me is a pretty big deal because I don't give that out lightly. So I'm absolutely loving this book. Then I'm also reading Homo Deus by Noah Yuval Harari, or Yuval Noah Harari. This always trips me up, but it's a nonfiction book about humanity. And I'm listening to that on Libby, which is like a really great library app. I'll show you guys. It looks like this. Oh boy, it looks like this. I'm about 50% through. Oh no, focus. There we go. Hi. I'm about 50% through this. And then I am also very casually doing a reread of the selection. This is totally like a YA, like fantasy dystopian, not fantasy really. It's like YA dystopian romance, like such a fun story. I'll probably talk about this more in another video, but I found the entire series for $9 at a thrift store. And I just loved this so much when I read it the first time. So I thought it'd be fun to just kind of casually reread it. So when I feel like picking it up, I am. So those are all the books that I read in April and May, plus the ones that I don't have physical copies of. So yeah, this was my first reading wrap up. So let me know what you guys thought. And if you have any book recs or if you've read any of these, please let me know what you thought about them. And yeah, I'm having so much fun with this little book channel. Hopefully fun and exciting things coming soon. I think I'm gonna go read this. It's so good. So yeah, okay. Thanks so much for being here. Definitely like and subscribe and go check out my sister's channel, and also my main channel on anthropology. Okay, yeah, I'll see you when I see you. Bye, you guys.